I'm 40 years old and I've confronted the system head on and been thrown in jail. And then my dad always told me, you got to work with the system. If you want to change it, you got to work with the system. Being an anarchist, you're going to come up with fucking battles, man. You got two free-thinking people.
All right. Do you believe that government is a viable mechanism for providing public goods and services that the private industry cannot do feasibly or as well?
Yes.
All right. Do you believe that that a lot of people aren't interested in governing themselves and would rather someone else do it or some other group do it? And not only that, but they're actually also incapable of making good decisions for themselves, and if left to their own devices, will make bad and counterproductive decisions.
Couldn't give a shit what decisions they make. But I'm not asking them to defend me from existential threats like China if they decide to fly F-16 bombers or F-22 Raptors, whatever they have, and just bomb the shit out of them. So I can have all the men I want with guns and I still can't even reach those planes. So as a collaborative effort, we need to mobilise a military force to defend our freedom. So I need a government.
I agree that we need to collectively mobilize for defense. I think defense is a very important thing. But do you believe that the only way to do that on a scale to combat the things that we might need to is in a government?
I'm open to be convinced if we can do it any other way.
All right. So basically so you believe that it is all right to empower a select group of people to conscript, right? Because we're talking about employing,
I never said conscription.
Do you believe that we need a military on a large scale, such as government, to protect us against other large scale and foreign evils?
I think if they've got aircraft carriers, then maybe we should have aircraft carriers.
Do you believe that aircraft carriers can only be made by public sector and the government funded through taxation?
I think it's probably the most effective way.
Do you believe that the efficacy is a excuse for taxation?
Well, this is the problem. So I want to be an anarchist, all right? But I just don't see it working. So if anyone can convince me, I'm open to it.
Well,
So we have a situation, and I like the disabled and the kids that are orphaned. You know, I think there's a duty. There's an obligation as a human being to contribute because you're living in the hood. All right, and I find it offensive as a human being that some people would choose to live in my hood and not contribute to the basics. Okay, government's corrupt as fuck, but as Ron Paul said, you know, we're stepping through Trump, we're stepping back from globalism. And if we can step down, which I think that's where Trump's going, and maybe Rand Paul can come in next after Trump leads away and brings it into small government, where the tax contribution and a voluntary tax contribution, or let's go for it, right? But you'd still have a governmental structure, and I feel I'm a freedom man, but I think small government can enhance my freedom.
So you believe that decentralization, you believe that going from bigger government to smaller government, you believe like from globalism to nationalism, you think it is, it's best, the best way to get to the most amount of freedom, like altruism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Utilitarianism, the greatest good for the greatest number of people will be most successfully accomplished by using the government to go step down as much as possible.
Yeah, so I think the community should be able to squash the government. Okay, so as long as, and that, I reckon in my hood, I could mobilise, if we had a localised government, that I would be able to form a crew
So you
that
believe
could
that
squash
you believe that you could voluntarily within your community get together with a bunch of other people and squash a collectivist group impeding on your freedoms?
Yes, if it was small enough government, so probably not bigger than a governmental structure in a municipality.
Will the government
probably not
willingly-
bigger than 50,000 people?
Would you agree the kind of people who go into government are interested in consolidating power and aren't interested in
That's the
getting
biggest crock
themselves
of
into an
bullshit that
interesting
you
state?
anarchists have been sucked into, because you've had 29 years of rotten government, which is basically a US monarchy, that dynasty, and you do not believe that good government can exist.
Do you believe that the kind of
do you believe good government can exist?
I do not. Because I do not, for one, I don't believe that the kind of people who go into government are interested in helping out.
That's a fundamental.
But-
That's a
I think-
fundamental vision.
Time out.
Time out.
Totally off track.
You're right.
Off track. Ask questions. Keep it to asking questions, and try to stay away from, like, when you respond to him. Try to stay away from saying you believe, like, because you're trying to tell
Yeah.
him what he believes, right? So let's return to questions, and stay with questions. That
All
way.
right.
Mm-hmm.
So, is it right to
Impersonal, literal, specific.
achieve the greatest degree of harmony and peace? Should we use the mechanism of government to do so?
Yes.
Is the
Personal, literal, specific.
is the definition of government not a monopoly on the use of force?
No. Government can be whatever you want. You can have fascist governments. You can have hippie governments. You can have Jimi Hendrix governments that just believe in music. But as long as the people elect, see, I don't. This bullshit that's been peddled to us, including equality. I've never seen equality. There's always been a hierarchy of people, whether the goodness in their heart or their capabilities or their competencies. There's always been a hierarchy, and there's always been leaders. And I suggest that no functioning society can exist.
So because
or
it's
ever have
only
has existed
because it's only
without a
ever been one
hierarchy of
way.
leadership. I just think that's nature.
That okay.
Do you want
perhaps.
me to? Do you want me to?
I want one more question.
Okay. Alright.
Do you believe that just because it has never existed, we should settle for something that could continue to erode on our liberties without pursuing the higher possibility of a greater degree of freedom just because we haven't seen it yet?
I'm 40 years old and I've confronted the system head on and been thrown in jail. And then my dad always told me, you got to work with the system. If you want to change it, you got to work with the system. And so I want to see my visions be completed in my lifetime. And the only way I can foresee that happening is if I join a political movement. Now, if the anarchists joined a political movement and said, these are our ideals, and we're going to work within the framework that's already established, including the 6 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, which are always going to be there. So it's not like you can say this utopia exists and then click, those 6 aircraft carriers disappear. Someone's going to take them. So why not the anarchist movement take them? And the only effective way of taking that is to join the governmental, the established process of debating on logical points, on a framework, on structure of how society can work, and throw it out to the public and let the free market decide. You know, there are a lot of silly people out there, but there are also a lot of smart people out there, and I think everyone has the right to think, and everyone should be able to make an informed decision based on information that's given to them. So here I am looking for a way that anarchy can work, and I'm hoping the conference delivers it. But at this stage, it hasn't.
But at the end of the day, it's not so much that you don't believe in individual freedom, but it's more that the potential for mass freedom won't be able to come to fruition without a limited governing body managing that so that other people in other foreign countries don't invade on our freedom.
Is that
It's there. It exists. That
But does it make it right?
Well, it doesn't make it right. Fuck no.
So you believe
we're
it's
living in
wrong,
reality.
but you have to work within the system to achieve the most amount of success, even if
Yes.
the paradigm of the system is wrong.
Do you
Yes.
mind if I ask you a question?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What is the way that governments have historically and up to this point funded everything that they do?
Through taxation system.
Right. Okay. So if government is doing something that I don't want it to do, that I believe it's immoral, do you believe men with guns should come to my house and make me pay up if I believe what they're doing is immoral and I don't want to fund it?
No, I think there should be an armed resistance against corrupt government by partisans or vigilante forces. So, the cancer within the United States is the deep state. Are they a private enterprise? I would say yes. I would say they're backed by the World Bank and they've infested the government of the United States and tarnished the whole governmental name. And so now what the extraction is the extraction of the cancer within the government to free it up and make it serve the people once again. And this is the great challenge.
So you think I have a right to resist if the IRS is at my doorstep and they have guns in my face, do I have the moral right to resist them?
At this stage, yes, because it's a corrupt governmental force.
If at any point any person believes that if somebody's at somebody's door with a gun to their head to rob them and to say we want to pay for something, and that person does not believe in it, not just me, but let's say, my sister or my neighbor, and they say I don't want to pay for that, is any lethal force justified in forcing anybody to pay for something they believe is immoral? If their conscience tells them it's wrong,
No.
should they have the right to say no?
Yes.
Do you believe that if you sacrifice your principles in the short term to gain them more in the long term, do you believe that you ever had those principles to begin with?
I'll never sacrifice my principles. I'm just going to work with the established framework.
But would you also say that the established framework is government, which is a monopoly on force, which erodes on personal liberty by forcing them to do things they might not necessarily want under the Machiavellian presumption that we need to do so because without this very government, we wouldn't have any rights. So, in a sense, would you say that they are eroding on the principle of protecting the individual right to secure the idea of large-scale individual rights? So, in a sense, they're sacrificing liberty and you're violating your principle or the principle in the short term to gain in the long term, but doesn't it defeat the purpose of having the principles?
You lost me, man.
I was about to be the judge and say that was a statement in the form of a question.
Yes, it was a statement in the form of a question. I think what he's getting at is if everything government does is based on taxation, meaning government doesn't acquire anything that it doesn't first steal by force from someone else. I think he's saying, aren't you basically going back on what you just said to me, which is nobody should have to fund something over the barrel of a gun they believe is immoral. Well, if you are consistent with that, I think he's trying to say, aren't you reneging on that by going backwards by saying, well, actually we need these things because if a government exists, then you're saying, well, some people should be forced over the barrel of a gun to pay for something.
Can you have a voluntary government? Can you have a government? Can you have a government? Can you have a mayor? Can you have a sheriff? Can you have a judge? And that is supported by a voluntary community.
I believe that now this might be semantics, but I actually believe that the word government is reserved only for things that are backed with deadly force. So I believe that once everything is voluntary, whatever it is, anything, defense, whatever, as soon as it's all consensual and I can remove my consent at any time, then it is no longer government. It is something else.
Well, that's a play on words, isn't it? Because my idea of government is to have an elected official, including the sheriff, including the mayor, including the judge, that gives some kind of framework to enhance security within a society, to enhance freedom.
But you said elected, right? Which
Elected,
means
absolutely.
under a democratic process.
Yes.
So the majority is violent. The minority has no say. They have to go against what they. Would you not say that the majority forcing their will upon the minority is violating the autonomy of the minority?
Well, democracy was formed as the ideal system to cater for the majority, and there will always be a minority in any sense. In being an anarchist, you're gonna come up with fucking battles, man. You got two free thinking people, and that's life, man. It's just a rolling battle, and I think with people and ideals, unless it's a cult.
So in democracy, the determinant for which side wins is which side is the majority. In anarchist society, the determinant for the what happens is whether or not the person is violating another person's property. So in a free market.
Oh, time's it. You're free. Good job, guys.